first became aware of Nick's story in the fall of 2016. I was new on the medical beat at the Houston Chronicle, and I was invited to a press conference at TIER Memorial Hermann, a rehab hospital in Houston. I was amazed by the things that the doctors were saying. They explained that Nick had been shot in the head and suffered a severe brain injury in Louisiana, and that when he came to TIER, that he had been diagnosed as being in a vegetative state. They quickly determined that Nick wasn't vegetative, that he was actually able to move his head slightly in two different directions, and they began using that to communicate with him, to get him to answer yes or no questions. This happens all the time, that most of the patients who come to TIER Memorial Hermann, having been labeled vegetative, are quickly found to be conscious on some basic level, able to communicate. Across the nation, of the tens of thousands of people who are vegetative, scientists now believe that 40% of those people are mislabeled, that they actually are conscious, just not able to show it. So Nick, like a lot of these patients, has made small, very small incremental improvements. We're now 2.5 years post-injury. His ability to communicate has improved, but just a few months ago he was back in the ICU with pneumonia. And that's a problem for a lot of these patients, is the physical setbacks. He's still in Houston, he's still recovering, he's still getting rehab, and his family's still hoping that they'll hear him talk at some point. I think my relative lack of experience covering medicine and science at that point was both a strength and a weakness. It was a strength in the sense that this was all new to me, and I approached it with a sense of wonder and amazement, and I think that allowed me to ask different questions. Like, can you believe that 40% of these patients are probably conscious? Can you imagine what that's like? That led me to really want to tell the story through this relationship between Nick and Danielle, because who are we as people other than our relationships with others? And so I think being new to the field and having my past experience, having covered human tragedies in different ways, I feel like helped me to tell the story in a way that would be engaging for the average person and not just medical researchers. Initially, the hope was that the hospital would provide us other people and we would shadow them through their time at the hospital. But it turned out that, that didn't happen. And so I searched Facebook, mostly. It's amazing how much people share about medical issues and their personal tragedies on social media. And so I just did keyword searches for TIER and minimally conscious and brain injury and the doctors' names, and ended up finding a half dozen different people, and some of them were willing to share their stories. Yeah, so I worked very closely with a photographer and video journalist named Mark Mulligan. He and I were partners on this from the beginning. There was a graphic artist who made some graphics for the story, Charles Apple. There was a web designer, Jordan Rubio, who made a beautiful online presentation that I feel like just helped carry readers through this, weaving together the words and the photos and the charts and graphics. So there was a team of a half dozen or 10 people in the newsroom who spent a lot of time on this. That's kind of the crux of the problem. There aren't really many resources for families. Some people estimate that the number of people who are in a minimally conscious state in this country is somewhere in the 250,000 ballpark. And so at TIER, they have 9 beds for this. This is one of a half dozen major rehab hospitals in the country that does this kind of work. And so nationally, there's dozens of beds, tens or hundreds of thousands of patients. And it's horrifying to think, if some of them are on the higher end of this minimally conscious spectrum, just really unable to communicate what their life is like. And so I think there actually needs to be a national conversation about what needs to change to create more opportunities for these patients.